Hi guys, this episode's gonna take a lot of explaining. So let's get the intro over with. Today we will be talking about why The Amazing Spider-Man is truly 100% amazing. Hi, my name is Tyler, and I love film. It's crazy to think that my last GES video was 3 weeks ago about the Suicide Squad. This has been a video I've been meaning to make for a long time. This video is 5 GES episodes overdue. If you're new here, I don't think I've explained this yet, but GES stands for a generic essay series, where I make a video essay about whatever I want. Today, I happen to want to talk about The Amazing Spider-Man, and why I, again, think it is 100% truly amazing. This is going to seem like a hot take, but I think this film is great. I think it is one of the best Spider-Man films ever made. And this film has inspired me on many different levels. This was my first introduction to a live-action Spider-Man, so that explains why I probably don't hate it as much as other people. Before you go screaming at me in the comments, please know that I adore the Raimi trilogy, and even liked it better than this film for the time. But this is my favorite Spider-Man film, and I think in the top 3 best. And this video will hopefully convince you of the same. And I think the Raimi trilogy is a definitive version of an on-screen Spider-Man. So now that we've got everybody else's biases out of the way, it is time for my first point. This film gives a fresh take on the character of Spider-Man. So, to explain this, I first have to say, adore comic books and understand them very well, especially Marvel comic books, and I know a great deal about Spider-Man. So yes, I love the Raimi trilogy. I love how faithful, but still original, it was in the confines of the Spider-Man mythos. But I'd much rather this film be made that is much different, and I think rightfully and successfully different, than just see another Raimi trilogy repeated once again. So, to prove to you that this film is a fresh take on the character of Spider-Man, I'm gonna first bring up Andrew Garfield's suit. I think this film has a great suit. I mean, it is well designed. One thing I like about this film, and that attributes to it being fresh, is it tries to be grounded and realistic. It doesn't try to be real. It tries to be realistic and grounded as this universe could be. Of course, that gets all thrown out with the second film. I am not here to talk about that film, because that film is not very good, and I can agree with the public on that. But back to realism. The most realistic part about this film is how Peter Parker reacts, how his personality is defined, how he deals with his problems, and how he solves them and adapts to the situation, which connects to the suit. First of all, I think it looks dope AF. I mean, the suit just looks awesome. Like, it looks like something that a high school kid, could make. I mean, you see the process of Peter making the suit, making the web shooters, and it all has a sense of realism to it and is realistic to an extent. You can see by the design of this suit that it tries to go up and beyond. It tries to be something new, and it is. I mean, the fact that it repulsed people at first, that it was controversial. Like, many people like the second movie suit way better. I do not favor that at all. That is not as creative as this suit. And I think this suit fits this film very well. I mean, the fact that Peter uses sunglass lenses for the eyes of the suit is just great detail. And it looks cool. This suit looks cool, and I like the aesthetic of it. You don't need to like it. It's a subjective thing. But I definitely think it adds on to the freshness of the film, or at least what makes it fresh. Another aspect of the film that I think makes it fresh is Peter Parker's personality. This is another controversial thing, another thing with mixed opinions, but a defining bias. Many people think his personality sucks, that Andrew Garfield is a bad Peter Parker but a great Spider-Man. I think he is a good both. He's not a faithful Peter Parker, but he is a good Peter Parker. I mean, they try to make him cool with the skateboard, and yeah, the skateboard was definitely dumb, but his personality traits are well. Remember when I said that this isn't a faithful Peter Parker? It's not. The surface level aspects are not a surface level Peter Parker, but the personality traits are. Peter Parker wasn't exactly a nerd, though he was. He was more of an outsider, as described in the original comics. It would be nice if this Peter Parker had a nerdy aspect, but the film handles it well. Makes this Peter Parker just a kid trying to get by, who has greater ambitions in life, but is still juggling the problems of a normal kid, and then having greater things thrust upon him, like what was meant to be communicated in the original Spider-Man comics. So it is a good adaptation of Peter Parker. A kid who has no intention to be anything but surface level, but has greatness thrust upon him, who has always had this heroic aspect to him that comes out once he becomes Spider-Man, once he sins, once he fails. Really what makes this film great. It is a fresh adaptation, not because it tries to be different, but because it wears the skin of something different, having the deeper values, the deeper traits, every aspect that makes this character Spider-Man. And I think this film succeeded at creating a new Spider-Man. Point 2, the Lizard. Honestly, this villain is pretty mediocre, and I understand the complaints about it. Heck, most of them I even agree with. The plot is fun with the Lizard, but stupid. His intentions aren't the greatest, and he could have been developed more, but there was definitely a hidden great villain behind him. First of all, the design is great. I would not have liked him to have the snout like many others were complaining about, or the lab coat, which he did don at the end, because that would be pretty stupid and it wouldn't look as good. I think the design is cool, and the Lizard is a good villain for the first Spider-Man movie in what was meant to be a trilogy. This villain could have, of course, been more developed, but I did like how he was a hulking beast and still a sympathetic character, just not an empathetic or an intimidating one. One more thing. Can we just take a second to admire this majestic Chad? Like, just look at that. I also can't believe they sold this to children. Wait, how'd that get in there?
That's what she said.
Point 4, the filmmaking and character development. One thing that I think makes this film 100% truly amazing is how it treats itself like an actual film. The stakes aren't low. The film actually has cinematography, like actual cinematography, things absent from most superhero films. The film has pretty good pacing, takes its time, slowly builds up its characters, and has good character development, mostly with Peter Parker. So I think Andrew Garfield is the greatest on-screen Spider-Man. Not saying he's the most faithful or the best Peter Parker, I'm saying Spider-Man, because he's always the most confident and believable in the suit out of all of the Spider-Men. And it is evident that work was put into making this film, to make it unique, to make it different, which succeeds, in my opinion, and makes it fresh, which adds on to it. This film has a unique style and some great shots. It uses Spider-Man, or at least his tone, in creative ways that haven't been used before and still haven't been replicated. And speaking of character development, let's talk about arguably the best part of the film. So, the best part of the film happens as the Lizard, Kurt Connors first turns into the Lizard and starts rampaging through a highway, putting innocent lives at risk. Peter, who has before this been going on a crusade of vengeance that is not very Spider-Man-like, decides to help. So he swings through the highway and he sees the lizard. He wants to go after him, but then this man calls him and is screaming that his son is stuck in a car hanging off the side of the bridge. Peter then instantly suspends everything to save that kid. The car falls and he webs it. He climbs into the car, tries to calm the kid down, and gives him his mask. The best thing about Peter Parker isn't that he's relatable, isn't that he's a kid. It's that he dons Spider-Man. And Spider-Man doesn't just save people, he inspires them. He says to the kid trying to save him, holding the flaming car with all of his might, "The mask will make you strong." The kid puts on the mask and is able to climb out. But the truth to that scene is Peter had his mask off. And he was just as strong, just as heroic as he was without it. That was the defining moment of the film, as many others can agree. And that's what truly makes this film a good Spider-Man film and a good film. This film proves to Peter Parker that he can be a hero, that he can be something more, that he can be everything he wanted to be, and he has to take on that responsibility. He has to accept that he's a normal kid, but he has to always reach for something greater and try his best to succeed. No matter where that takes him, no matter the grief he feels for the death of his uncle, no matter the arrogance and the pride he feels in being Spider-Man and taking vengeance upon criminals that happen to have not even done the crimes he says they have done. Peter Parker, for a while in this film, becomes judge, jury, and executioner, even though he doesn't kill anybody. And that's what people hate about this film most. That Peter Parker is dark, that Spider-Man is vengeful until this scene. Something I tend to be pointing on a lot on my channel is the Man of Steel effect. People don't like that movie for the same reasons they don't like this movie. But like this movie, there's a defining moment for each character. Both films are dark, but that's what makes them great. Superman snaps necks until he learns how to hope. He is hopeless until he learns his lesson. And Spider-Man, Peter Parker, is irresponsible until he learns to be something greater, something responsible in Spider-Man. This is easily my favorite shot of the film. In this scene, Peter Parker is contemplating things that he has done and knows he must do, that he has to do, that he has the power to do, that he has to be responsible to do. He's making an active choice in this scene to put the mask on, and he does. And that's what defines Spider-Man. My fifth and final broad point is this film makes you believe. It makes you believe in Spider-Man. It made me believe in Spider-Man, and it helped to make me believe in filmmaking. This is one of my favorite films of all time for good reason. Mostly because I had an emotional attachment when I was little, and every time I turned on FX, this movie was on, and I adored it. But because this film is grounded, it sets up its own mythos, and it is consistent with it. It's consistent with its characters. It gives you enough moments, enough everything to believe. To believe you can get bitten by a spider and get superpowers, and to believe that with the right traits, you can be this kid. Also, Gwen Stacy is a great character in this film. Sorry, Point 3 was played for laughs. And her father, that was a great moment that was ultimately wasted in the next film. Overall, I think this film is great. It's one of my favorite Spider-Man films, and I encourage you to watch it in a new light. I give this film a 9.5 out of 10.